Until now, our analysis has been for an exchange economy with two consumers, Rob and Friday. Now, if we want to understand a market, we're going to have to think of a situation where there are many consumers. So let's think of a situation where there's 1,000 people who are identical and they're just like Rob, and 1,000 other people who are identical and just like Friday. So it's an economy, instead of two people, there's 2,000 people. Half of them are clones of Rob, and half of them are clones of Friday. And when I say clone, these are people who have exactly the same preferences and exactly the same endowment. So let's suppose this island has a market on it. So all the Robs and all the Fridays show up at this market. They bring their endowments, so the apples and the bananas that they're endowed with. And there's prices quoted on this market. And each person then buys from the person offering the lowest price. And what we're going to do is we're going to assume that Rob and Friday are what we call price takers. Right? When we say price takers, we mean that you take the prices given. We made this assumption when we were thinking about the consumer and trying to understand how a consumer chooses their optimal bundle. We also made this assumption for firms when we were trying to understand the optimal production for a firm in terms of the inputs they would use. We assumed that they took the price of the inputs as given, and also when the firm decides to makes a decision as to how much to produce, we took it as given. We assumed that the firm is going to take the price of the output as given. So that was the assumption that individuals are price takers. This is a pretty reasonable assumption when there are a lot of people with similar taste and have similar endowments. So like situations like stock markets, commodity markets, these are reasonable assumptions. Even when it's not exactly true, when there aren't people with exactly the same preferences and tastes and endowments, it's still a pretty useful benchmark, and it helps us build some intuition about how a market's going to work. Okay, so the market has a price PA and a price PB. PA is the price of apples, PB is the price of bananas. So when all the Robs and all the Fridays show up at the market and bring their endowment with them, they get income from selling their endowments. Right? Then they use this income to buy the bundle that they would like. So what we're doing here is if you recall, when we studied the consumer and we tried to understand how the consumer is going to pick an optimal bundle, we just took this income as just given. It came out of nowhere. Now, instead of having this income come out of nowhere, we're kind of grounding that in something. We're saying, okay, well, these guys are endowed. They own certain amounts of each of the goods, and the value of that is going to be what their income is. Right, so Rob started with 20 apples and 30 bananas. So his income is 20. He has 20 apples. And if the price of apples is PA, well, how much are those 20 apples worth? Well, 20 times PA. Well, and if he has 30 bananas, those 30 bananas are worth 30 times PB. Altogether, his endowment is worth 20 times PA plus 30 times PB. And that's what we call YR. That's any of the 1,000 Robs, each of them has the same income, YR. So the budget constraint for a Rob is a Rob can afford a bundle AR, BR, so long as the value of that bundle, the cost of that bundle, which is the cost of the AR apples plus the cost of the PB or the BR bananas, altogether, the sum of those is the total cost of that bundle. So long as that bundle costs exactly what the income is, we say that bundle is a bundle that Rob can afford. So that's the budget constraint. So this looks familiar to you, right? So if I just replace this part by Y, that looks exactly like what you've seen before. So let's suppose PA were 1 and PB were 2. Well, then the income would be 80. Remember, Rob's endowed with 20 apples and 30 bananas. So that's going to be 20 times 1 plus 30 times 2, which is 80. So what does Rob's budget line look like? So we can plot that budget line in the Edgeworth box. And it looks like this. Right? If he spent all of his money on bananas, remember he's got $80 as his income. If he spends all $80 on bananas, the price of bananas, recall, is 2. So how many bananas can he buy if he has $80 and the price of bananas is 2? Well, he can buy 40 bananas. On the other hand, apples cost $1 and he's got $80. So if he spent all his money on apples, well, then he could buy 80. So this corner of the Edgeworth box is going to be one corner of his budget line, and 40 is the other corner. And we just draw a straight line through the endowment to that point. One important thing to note is that the endowment itself is always going to be on the budget line. Why? Well, if somebody is endowed with let's say EA apples and EB bananas, right? So that's a bundle they could consume. They could consume the bundle EA EB. So that's EA apples and EB bananas. No matter what the endowment is, if that's your endowment, what is the value of this endowment? Your income is going to be PA times EA plus PB times EB. That's going to be your income. That's by definition. So can you afford this bundle? Well, of course you can, because PA times EA plus PB times EB is equal to PA times EA plus PB times EB, which is your income. So the endowment is always going to be on the budget line. Okay. Now, what does the budget line for Friday look like? Well, Friday's income is going to be 100, right? Because remember, he's endowed with 60 apples, so times 1, plus he's endowed with 20 bananas, and they have a price of 2, which is equal to 100. Now, what's beautiful about the Edgeworth box is that everything is lined up perfectly so that the same line, we just have to draw one line. A single line gives us the budget line for both consumers. Right, so this line right here, this red line that I've circled, is the budget line for both of the consumers. Okay, so what happens if there's a change to one of the prices? Let's say the price of apples goes up. Remember, PA was 1 before, and let's suppose it increases to 2. So it's easiest to think about what happens to the budget line for Rob because it's oriented the way we're used to thinking about things. So first thing that's going to happen is that the income is going to change, right? So the value of Rob's endowment changes. The second term, 30 times PB, remains the same, right? That's going to be 30 times 2. However, the first term, 20, the price used to be 1, now it's 2. We add those together, right? So this is now going to be higher. Right? So it's going to be 40 plus 60, which is 100. His income used to be 80, now it's 100. So that's one change. However, the slope is also going to change. The slope used to be minus 1 over 2. Now it's going to be minus minus 2 over 2, which is minus 1. So Rob can buy less apples for the same amount of money. So thinking of it another way, the price of apples goes up so he can buy fewer apples. However, the price of apples goes up so he gets more for the apples that he already owns. So his income goes up. So there's these two effects to the increase in the price of apples. Right, now the same thing happens to Friday. Let's look at what happens in the Edgewick box. Remember, this was the original picture. This is when the price of apples is 1. Right, so this budget line has a slope minus a half. Now, once this changes, the budget line rotates, right? So it rotates in this direction. It gets steeper. This guy has a slope of -1. So we went from this budget line to this one. So whenever there's a change to the prices, it causes the budget line to rotate, but it's always still going to pass through that endowment point. Right? So we always just end up rotating the budget line around the endowment.